The cockpit warning erupted like a scream in broad daylight over the endless blue Atlantic, and within seconds one of the private jet's engines began tearing itself apart. The woman who had laughed at a grease-stained mechanic only hours earlier suddenly found herself gripping the armrest as every passenger realized the aircraft carrying them across the ocean might never reach land. The cruel words she had thrown at him echoed louder than the alarms. "You're just a mechanic." She had believed those words defined his worth. She was about to discover they would instead define the greatest mistake of her life. Before we continue, if you believe kindness is stronger than pride, forgiveness is more powerful than revenge, and everyone deserves a second chance, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe to our channel to become part of our growing community. Colton Mercer had spent 23 years repairing aircraft engines. His hands carried scars earned from thousands of hours beneath wings and inside engine nacelles, but he wore every scar with quiet pride. He had never attended glamorous charity galas or appeared on magazine covers beside billionaires. He simply believed that every bolt tightened correctly and every inspection completed honestly represented another family arriving home safely. His wife had passed away from cancer 7 years earlier, leaving him to raise his daughter, Brenna, alone. Every morning before heading to the maintenance hangar, he promised himself he would make the skies just a little safer for strangers he would never meet. Vivian Ashcroft lived in a completely different world. She had inherited one of Europe's largest luxury fashion companies after her father retired. Young, brilliant, and fiercely ambitious, she was admired by investors for transforming the company into a global empire. Success had slowly convinced her that expensive suits deserved more respect than oil-stained uniforms. Without realizing it, she had begun measuring people by titles instead of character. That bright afternoon at the executive airport, Vivian arrived surrounded by assistants, lawyers, and security personnel. Cameras flashed as reporters photographed her boarding the sleek private jet that would carry her to an important investment summit in New York. Every minute mattered. Colton was finishing a routine inspection on the aircraft after noticing something that bothered him. A faint vibration pattern inside one engine suggested the possibility of microscopic fatigue around a compressor assembly. The readings were subtle, but his experience refused to ignore them. He immediately requested additional inspection time before departure. The request irritated everyone. Executives complained, the flight crew worried about missing departure slots. Vivian walked directly toward the mechanic with visible frustration. She looked at his stained coveralls and weathered hands before dismissing him with a cold smile. She insisted that certified computers had already cleared the aircraft and that she refused to delay a meeting worth hundreds of millions because a mechanic had a feeling. Colton calmly explained that machines collected data, but experience recognized patterns long before computers sometimes could. He wasn't trying to create problems. He was trying to prevent one. Vivian barely listened. She made the remark that everyone nearby would later remember forever. She told him he was just a mechanic and that people who built billion-dollar companies understood risk better than people who tightened bolts. Several employees looked away in embarrassment. Colton felt the sting, but he simply nodded. Pride had never repaired an engine. Airport regulations prevented him from stopping the departure once the official release had been signed by higher authorities. All he could do was submit his concern through emergency maintenance documentation before watching the jet lift gracefully into the afternoon sky. He whispered a silent prayer anyway. For nearly 2 hours everything appeared normal, then one vibration became many. Tiny metal fatigue transformed into catastrophic failure. Inside the engine, damaged compressor blades shattered, sending fragments through the turbine. The cockpit filled with warning alarms. Passengers felt the aircraft shudder violently. The pilots immediately shut down the damaged engine, but debris had also affected hydraulic systems controlling portions of the aircraft. The jet remained airborne, but every decision now carried enormous consequences. Vivian's confidence disappeared. Looking through the window at endless ocean, she realized there was nowhere to land. No roads, no cities. Only water stretching to every horizon beneath the bright afternoon sun. Back at the airport, Colton learned about the emergency through maintenance operations. When engineers reviewed the aircraft's inspection records, they immediately found his original report documenting the suspicious vibration before departure. Because Colton understood that specific engine model better than almost anyone in the company, emergency coordinators urgently contacted him. Within minutes he entered the operations center. Large screens displayed aircraft telemetry. Pilots described abnormal readings, manufacturer specialists joined through video conferences, highly educated. Engineers debated competing theories. Colton quietly listened, then he asked for one overlooked temperature reading. The room became silent. That single number confirmed exactly what he feared. That he carefully explained that debris had likely damaged an oil distribution passage rather than completely destroying structural integrity. If the pilots adjusted power settings in an unusual sequence developed years earlier after another rare incident, remaining hydraulic pressure might stabilize enough to maintain safer control until reaching emergency landing range. Nobody could guarantee success, but every other option looked worse. The pilots trusted his reasoning. They followed every instruction exactly. For several agonizing minutes, nothing happened. Then gradually the unstable pressure readings began settling. The aircraft stopped losing controllability. Hope quietly returned. The nearest suitable airport prepared emergency crews while the jet slowly descended towards safety. Inside the cabin, passengers cried openly. Business rivals embraced one another. Expensive watches and designer clothing suddenly seemed meaningless compared to another chance at life. Vivian sat motionless. She remembered the mechanic's calm face. She remembered mocking him in front of everyone. She remembered believing wealth made people important. Now her own survival depended entirely on knowledge possessed by the man she had humiliated. After what felt like an eternity, the aircraft finally touched the runway. Emergency vehicles raced beside it. Smoke drifted from the damaged engine as the jet rolled to a stop. The cabin exploded with relief. Some passengers laughed, others wept, many simply closed their eyes in gratitude. News of the successful emergency landing spread rapidly. Journalists praised the experienced mechanic whose forgotten maintenance report and technical guidance had helped save everyone aboard. Colton avoided interviews. He returned to his maintenance hangar because another aircraft required inspection. In his mind, the real heroes were the pilots who had trusted his advice under unimaginable pressure. Several days later, Vivian visited the hangar without reporters, assistants, or photographers. She wore ordinary clothes instead of designer fashion. For the first time in years, she arrived somewhere with no interest in impressing anyone. She found Colton rebuilding an engine component at a workbench. He looked exactly as before. Grease on his sleeves, tools arranged neatly, absolute concentration. He looked up politely. Before he could speak, Vivian apologized with tears filling her eyes. She admitted she had confused status with wisdom and appearance with value. She confessed that facing death above the Atlantic had forced her to confront the kind of person she had become. Success had built her company but slowly damaged her character. Colton listened quietly. He had every reason to resent her. Instead, he remembered long hospital days beside his late wife. Illness had taught both of them that bitterness only made suffering heavier. He accepted her apology, not because she deserved instant forgiveness, but because carrying anger would never improve tomorrow. Vivian asked what she could possibly do to repay him. Colton surprised her. He requested nothing for himself. Instead, he mentioned aviation schools struggling to afford scholarships for students whose families couldn't pay tuition. He explained that the industry desperately needed skilled mechanics because too many young people believed only glamorous careers mattered. That conversation changed both lives. Vivian established a foundation funding technical education across several countries. Thousands of young mechanics, engineers, electricians, and aviation technicians received scholarships over the following years. Every scholarship carried a simple message: every profession that protects human lives deserves respect. She also transformed hiring practices inside her company. Executives now spent 1 week every year working alongside warehouse staff, maintenance crews, cleaners, and production workers to better understand the people whose invisible efforts sustained the business every day. The company culture slowly changed, employee satisfaction rose, staff turnover declined, profits eventually increased as well. Investors called it brilliant leadership. Vivian privately knew it began with humiliation at an airport and terror above an ocean. Colton never became famous. He preferred it that way. He continued repairing aircraft, mentoring apprentices, and attending every one of Brenna's college events. Watching his daughter graduate as an aerospace engineer became the proudest day of his life. She often told classmates that her father had taught her the difference between intelligence and wisdom. Intelligence solved problems after they appeared. Wisdom prevented them before anyone noticed. Years later, a young scholarship recipient asked Colton whether he ever regretted forgiving the woman who had publicly insulted him. That he smiled thoughtfully before explaining that forgiveness never erased what happened. It simply refused to let yesterday steal tomorrow. He believed people sometimes needed to survive their worst mistakes before becoming their best selves. Those words stayed with everyone who heard them. Vivian repeated them during graduation ceremonies, students wrote them inside notebooks, pilots quoted them during safety conferences, families shared them around dinner tables. One act of humility had traveled farther than the private jet ever could. Before we reach the end of this story, take a moment to leave a meaningful comment sharing what you believe matters more in life, a person's title or their character, and tell us why.as. Sunlight filled another peaceful afternoon over the same Atlantic Ocean. Years later, another aircraft crossed safely overhead. Its engines had been inspected by one of the scholarship graduates whose education existed because one mechanic chose compassion instead of revenge, and one proud executive found the courage to change. None of the passengers knew the remarkable chain of events protecting them, but they arrived safely with their loved ones because kindness had quietly accomplished what pride never could. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. Remember that every person you meet carries unseen value, and sometimes the hands covered in grease, dust, or hard work are the very hands that keep the rest of the world safely moving forward.